What's the dumbest thing someone has ever told you? I once found a big bulldog in my backyard. I don't own a bulldog. He was a big friendly, but slow-witted guy. He looked healthy and had a collar but no tags, so I knew he was a local. I made sure he had water and went to the front yard to start knocking on doors. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw the family 3 houses down all gathered in their front yard. So another case closed for our young detective. I walked over to them and said, "You guys missing a bulldog?" The mother looked at me and said, "Is his name Tyson?" The question took me aback. I mean, he didn't have tags. They knew he didn't have tags. So all I could think to say was, "He didn't say. But I'm pretty sure he's yours." To this day I wonder if that woman knew how dumb that question was. Yes ma'am, that's what he told me he called himself. Meth was safer than weed. Edit, this was said to 15-year-old me when I got caught smoking weed and my meth head uncle said meth was a safer drug and I should try that instead. When the directions on a microwave meal say to keep the item in the microwave for some time after finishing, it's to allow the extra microwaves to get out of that food so it doesn't hurt you. That sounds like something a parent told their kid, so they wouldn't immediately eat it and burn themselves. Then they just didn't question it as an adult. My aunt argued with me that humans have 2 hearts, one on each side. She didn't know the difference between heart and lungs. Had a roommate that owed taxes 1 year, so he didn't file the return. He corrected his withholding so he would get a refund the next year. Filed that return. 6 weeks later he gets a note from the IRS that he owed from the prior year, and they were using his refund to pay it, and he still owed them for interest and penalties. His reply: "They can't do that." They can, and they did, and their next step was going to be to garnish his wages if he didn't reply. Similar to that, I had a friend say to me it doesn't make sense that she can't claim 401k contributions from past years every year, it's still in my 401k. I tried over several conversations, including with diagrams, and she didn't get it. I finally said, "So once someone has saved the equivalent of their annual salary in their 401k, you never pay taxes again? That's now how it works." We had a team lunch some years ago, and I ended up in a conversation with one of our account managers, a woman in her 30s who worked for a multi-million-pound company. She insisted that the sun was the same size/distance as the moon, and stars were asteroids falling to Earth. This was long before the whole flat Earth idiocy kicked off, and to this day stands out as the most astoundingly ignorant thing I've ever heard. When I was a math tutor, legit had a girl try to tell me there were only 12 hours in a day. I'm great at explaining stuff in ways people can understand, but man, that was a challenge. My 3rd grade teacher told me that I had spelled grateful incorrectly and proceeded to mock me. "Are you talking about a cheese grater here? It's spelled GREAT, fool." Many of you may be too young to remember this, but the Vice President of the United States once told a 12-year-old child that the child had spelled potato wrong, and that it was actually spelled potato. I've been told by multiple people that fish aren't animals. When I was in high school, a friend was talking about being a vegetarian. I was confused because she had just eaten fish. She said that fish wasn't meat and another person there agreed with her. I asked if they weren't meat, were they vegetable or mineral? No good answer to that one. A guy at work told me that STDs were created by people having multiple sexual partners. When I pointed out that you could have a group of people that slept together and if none of them had any diseases they wouldn't catch anything, he just shook his head and told me that's not how it works. I once had to correct someone who was adamant that Earth had 17 moons. I had a customer insist that $100, $40 equals $80. Me, what is 10 to 4? Customer, 6. Me, yes. So what is 100 to 40? Customer, 80. Shake my head. No calories in toast. Whiskey stops cancer. Plus you don't get cancer from menthol cigarettes. That sounds like the kind of problem that solves itself. Regular bras don't go under plain shirts. Only blouses. This girl was appalled I was wearing a normal bra instead of a sports bra under a graphic shirt. Like lectured me about how it's not right. I'm pretty sure they don't even have roads and cars up in Canada. Californian dude vacationing in Idaho around 60 miles from Canada border. I just found out Europe wasn't a state, it's its own country. Ben B. 2017. He was 18 at the time. That if I froze my water bottles before putting them on my bike, for long rides on hot summer days, they would weigh more. I just stared at him. That Africa doesn't have access to the oceans. This was in 9th grade, but still, I gasped. I called my credit card company to set up international card usage because I was going on a Mediterranean cruise. I told the agent one of the stops was Italy and he said, "How do you take a cruise to Italy?" There was an awkward few seconds of silence and then he apologized for being an idiot and asked me to forget what he said. I work in childcare. A parent got mad at me because I put their little boy in a pink diaper because they didn't pack extras. Despite several reminders, I was told I'm trying to turn their son gay. Because of the color of a diaper. Had a teacher tell our class that it can't rain over water. She proceeded to tell us that if the clouds are over water they will just wait until they were over land so it doesn't waste water. The moon is fake and gravity doesn't exist. I told them to prove it and pointed to the nearest tall building. So true. If the moon had gravity, the building would shoot upward at night. Lol, of course. A girl told me she couldn't get a sunburn because there was too much wind. Same girl insisted she would become a doctor. I asked why she thought she couldn't tan or sunburn if there was a breeze with a clear sky and 100 degrees Fahrenheit weather. She explained that the wind would cause her to not sweat so she wouldn't tan. A coworker once told me after a storm, I got to work twice as fast this morning because all the traffic lights were out. The only reason they lived was because everyone else on the road knew that traffic lights default to an always stop when they're out. This was probably 25 years ago. She was very young and had just graduated with a journalism degree. This was her first job and her parents paid for everything her entire life. Sheltered doesn't even cover it. One of our engineers said hesitantly, "You know it doesn't work that way, right? When lights fail, they default to their most restrictive state. In this case, that would be an always stop." She said, "I don't understand, why would they do it that way?" He said, "Well, imagine you enter an intersection at 45 miles per hour at the same time as someone coming from a cross direction at the same speed. What would happen?" She thought about it and her eyes got huge. I think she got it. Isaac Newton invented gravity with the help of Albert Einstein, stared at them for a while then left. I can't blame you for leaving. I blame you for not levitating. You don't understand the gravity of this situation. My college roommate was so bad we started a list. My favorite two are: peach is not a color, only a fruit. But orange is both. And Latinas come from Latin. As in the country Latin. When asked if he could show us where that was on a globe, he pointed to what was clearly marked Uzbekistan. It's dangerous to listen to your own heartbeat with a stethoscope. They said your heart will try to match what you heard and that will in effect stop your heart. There was no explanation given when asked why medical personnel didn't have issues listening to patients with heartbeat irregularities. My wife's sister is married to a guy who wouldn't go to see Jurassic Park because he thought dinosaurs never existed. Edit. He is a young Earth creationist, so that's pretty self-explanatory. My friend just admitted that she didn't know cows were mammals and omnivores are a thing. We're in college. She's a freaking lab assistant. The reason you aren't getting better is because you aren't sending enough positive energy out into the universe. My neurologist. Turns out I had autoimmune encephalitis. Kind of the same concept. I was showing a co-worker some nighttime sky objects. I pointed to a bright object. Telling a North Dakota HS graduate that it was Jupiter, another planet. He asked, "Is that one of those things they sent up in the space shuttle?" Early 1980s. Ron, if you read this, I'm sorry for laughing at you. Follow up. Later that night when others teased him about this story, he replied, "Sorry folks, but I am not a geologist. I don't get off the farm much." You should name your inventions something other than a nader. Then what am I supposed to call them? Once I was talking about the seasonal/weather difference between the US and Argentina with some coworkers, as I had traveled to Buenos Aires during our winter but it was summertime there. Anyway, one of said coworkers asked, "Okay, so what month is it over there right now?" So I paused and then had to explain to them that although there's a seasonal difference, the calendar year/month still aligns with the rest of the world. Shortly after that, my other coworker, who overheard this exchange and happened to be from New Zealand, just looked at me afterwards, puzzled, and said, "Wow, I really thought they were joking. It was a serious question?" I recently met a grown-ass adult who didn't know that Hawaii was a US state. When they passed the law in Illinois that requires you to turn on your headlights whenever windshield wipers are needed, a guy told me that he always gets mixed up which way they mean. You know what makes me happy, so when you don't do it you are intentionally making me unhappy. I was so dumbfounded by this logic that I couldn't make an argument at all. Playing Cards Against Humanity with a group of friends. The judge is reading the cards everyone played and struggles with the pronunciation of one, saying something we think is along the lines of coccyx. We explain to him what your coccyx is and move to the next round. Next round starts and we start talking about who played the coccyx card since it seemed out of context, and everyone claims they don't remember playing it. We ask the judge to flip the cards from the previous round. The word was khakis. We were 20. My mom, did you know that when Biden becomes president, they're going to change the national anthem to Imagine by John Lennon? Me, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Once had a coworker acquaintance who was about to get married tell me he was already planning to cheat on his wife. Not that he already had someone lined up, but that he would find someone just to cheat with. Why? Because 50% of spouses have affairs and that since it was him, it wouldn't be her. Edit. Yes, he was perfectly serious. I told him should he and his future wife both have affairs while my wife and I do not, then the statistic remains at 50%. Methinks he just needed an excuse to have an affair. A girl once told me she wouldn't swallow cum because it has the same amount of calories as a full roast dinner. I just laughed and told her if that was true she'd just solved world hunger. She cheated, but she wants to save the relationship and is trying really hard, so I think I owe it to her. Ended up getting cheated on 2 more times before he took my advice and then ended up blaming me for being unhappy, not friends with him anymore. My boyfriend left his apartment for a week, came back, and saw shit and a used washcloth in his private bathroom toilet. His roommate was the only one there. When confronted, he swore on everything that a demon had done it, and tried to put the blame on him. Cold pizza is healthier because it's not greasy. During spring, you see how the sun is staying up longer in the evening? That's because of global warming. A freaking science degree college graduate. A woman I worked with when I was about 20 believed in spontaneous generation of life, generatio spontanea. For example, rats would come into existence within a pile of food and paper waste without the necessity of a mommy and daddy rat. Might not be the dumbest thing on here, but I'm still mad as hell at this guy. He moved to Canada a couple years ago onto a piece of property next to us. He proceeded to cut down nearly every tree he had, including some large, old sugar maples that we knew to be excellent sap producers. He left maybe 5 young maple trees, all close to the road. We find they don't produce as well. We think it might be because of road salt. He tapped his 5 trees. The first time I met him, he said to me, I tapped my trees but they're not running. They're just dripping. Holy frick, what an idiot. That's what a running tree does. You should have known that before you cut down all your best trees. You'd think if he intended to make some syrup for himself he'd do some fricking research first and actually keep some maples. I'm extra salty because this piece of property used to be so beautiful. Those large trees let just enough light into a meadow of snowdrops, wildflowers, and daffodils in the spring. It was straight out of a fairy tale. It's now an open field bordered by brambles. He's built the ugliest fricking house and erected not 1, but 2 garages made of industrial shipping containers. Also, he threatened to shoot our dog. Needless to say, my family and I do not like him much at all. I'm a good drunk driver. It doesn't affect me that much. He was an awful driver when he was sober. We were in 3 at-fault accidents in the 10 months we dated. I can only imagine how much worse it was when he was drunk. Had a therapist tell me frogs were reptiles. Once had a guy tell me he was majoring in nursing because it seemed like a good path to med school. Bruh, no, for like 50 different reasons, no. I worked in a city that has a high military population. We gave military discounts if you could prove you were active duty. We had a family come in one day, dad, mom, adult son, who had never been before. The dad read the admission board and said, "Oh hey, you can get a discount for admission." To the son while handing him the sign. He read the sign and said, "I swear to God, I'm not in the military, I'm in the army." All I could think was, good Lord, they let you have guns. If Mexico is in North America and I'm American, that means I'm Mexican. Everyone there immediately started laughing and she looked very confused. If you are going to die today, would you die tomorrow? Told to me by someone lecturing me about my procrastination. 1 divided by 2 equals 1. You know there are pictures where you can see that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have reptile scales, right? My friend told me she could get into an Ivy League school without even applying, just for going to some special high school. This is impossible, and she still thinks she's automatically getting into that school as well as getting half off tuition, lol. I had a roommate for about a month before we kicked him out. Dude was a severe alcoholic and addict, and beyond the unpredictable and violent behavior, he was without a doubt the dumbest man I have ever met. On one occasion during a storm he mentioned how crazy it is that lightning came from the ground. I was fascinated by his brain and asked him to tell me everything he knew about lightning. I learned that lightning is channeled from the ground through houses and shoots out of the chimney or an antenna into the sky. There was also no such thing as lightning before houses, as it didn't have a way to escape the ground. On another occasion I walked into the kitchen to see our sponge had been poorly cut in half in an attempt to separate the abrasive part from the rest. A steak knife beside it. I was instantly amused and asked him what had happened. He then mumbled out like Ozzy that he had fixed it. As always, I immediately wanted to know more. He told me with great struggle that he was at the store and saw the 2 parts of a sponge sold separately and wanted to fix ours. Heroic. He kept flour tortillas on a plate with no cover on top of our fridge. When he'd eat, he would place the rock-hard tortilla on a plate, put whatever on top, eat it all with his hands, and then throw away the tortilla. Every single time. When I asked him what was up with the tortilla, he told me it was a garnish. He also, much to my horror, would microwave oysters and eat garlic without peeling it. This was 7-ish years ago and I still wonder about him from time to time. I knew a compulsive liar growing up. He was fucking awful. Ended up going to a community college. with him where he openly bragged about how much student debt he had, which he claimed was in the hundreds of thousands, but that wasn't true. Anyway, this story took place while we carpooled with 2 other guys to school, while we talked about student loans. I actually went to Ottawa once to protest student loans. I was in a bathroom taking a piss, and who was pissing next to me? Dave Suzuki. We said hello and he asked if I was there for the protest. I told him I was, and he said that he knew someone I should meet. So I walked with him, and next thing I know, I'm face to face with Stephen Harper, Canada's Prime Minister at the time. I explained my concerns to the Prime Minister himself, and he wrote me a check right there for the exact amount that I owed for student loans. I ripped it up and told him I wouldn't accept it unless he did that for each and every student loan in Canada. And that was the first time I met Dave Suzuki. This dude was dead serious. Went to a music festival with a couple of friends. One of the friends decided to take LSD. After the festival he wouldn't shut up about this girl he was in love with now. Didn't know her name, where she lived, and to boot she was there with a guy. He went home and told his wife of 7 years it was over. He said he had met his true love. The idiot didn't even talk to her, he saw her from across the way. Some people can't handle drugs and reality. BTW, they divorced 4 months later. Some people at my job were discussing what you were allowed to eat on Fridays during Lent. If you ain't religious, the rule is no meat on Fridays, and this one woman was arguing that you can eat chicken because it's not meat, it's poultry. At this same job I overheard another person say that vaccines cause Down syndrome. Yeah, not autism, which is still incorrect, but at least it's the myth people go with. This person thought it caused Down syndrome. And the real kicker is, we work at a medical testing laboratory. We literally do a prenatal test for Down syndrome. You can't just come down with Down syndrome later. Thank you for watching, hit the like button for more.